Growing Together, a video presentation covering poverty's definitions and measures.
Created and presented by Chloe Kim
and Cate Cox.
To fully understand poverty, one has to both understand its current successes and shortfalls while creating a diverse approach to encompass all people.
In order to elaborate and explain our points, today we will start with the background of poverty, including current definitions and measures, then our definitions of poverty, followed by our proposed measures, and lastly, answering potential counterarguments, as well as our conclusion.
Here is a brief overview of the current measures of poverty. We can think of poverty and its measures as a tree. On the tree, the roots represent different standards that can be indications of poverty, such as income, basic needs, and any aid. The different branches show the current measures, both international and domestic.
Make note of Rector's argument at the top, as we will be reintroducing it later for the counterarguments.
Moving closer to examine the left side of the tree, international measures include the following. The Extreme Poverty Measure, or the EPM, measures absolute poverty. Currently, the EPM threshold sits at $2.15 per person per day.
The Multidimensional Poverty Index, or the MDPI, has a three-pronged approach that focuses on health, education, and living standards. This provides a better insight to the quality of living that the EPM and just measuring income does not cover. Moving on to the capabilities approach, this provides a comprehensive measure that considers not only the resources or income an individual might have, but also whether or not they have the ability, freedoms, or opportunity to act on or utilize those resources.
The capabilities approach can be difficult to grasp, so we will use an example here. Imagine that you have the right to vote in your country. You can then just go vote, right? Wrong. Let's say you have the right to vote, but your country is currently an active war zone, or you have an intellectual or physical disability that prevents you from going to the polls. The capabilities approach argues that yes, while you have the right to vote, since your environment or situation prevents you from acting on that right, you are deprived of that capability entirely.
We will return to the capabilities approach, but for now, we will summarize the domestic measures. The official poverty measure, or the OPM, measures poverty by assessing pre-tax gross annual cash income and cash benefits. Its threshold is 3 times the cost of a thrifty food basket adjusted for inflation. The biggest flaws we find with the OPM is that it does not consider geographic differences, non-cash benefits, and only considers everyone in a household related by birth, marriage, or adoption. The Supplemental Poverty Index, or the SPM, addresses many of the flaws of the OPM. Its threshold is 1.2 times 83% of the median spending on food, clothing, shelter, and utilities, and considers non-cash government benefits, household composition, and non-discretionary expenses, to name a few.
The graph to the left shows the difference in child poverty rates between the OPM and the SPM. This is attributed to the fact that the SPM accounts for non-cash benefits that usually assist children or families with children. This discrepancy between the two measures can lead to confusion or inadequate policy changes. With careful assessment of current definitions and measures, we created our own. We should define poverty as the inability to live a sufficient life due to a lack of basic resources, freedoms, and opportunities. And we should measure poverty through assessing multiple factors and one's own ability and comparing them to others in society.
But what exactly is a sufficient life? The short answer is it's different for everyone. By defining poverty in this way, we allow individuals to determine what a sufficient life looks like to them. For an individual who is food insecure but has a home and a job, they might believe that sufficient living is not having to worry about when they will be able to eat next. For an individual who lives amidst military or political conflict, peace and protection might be what they require to live a sufficient life.
Because of this, how we define poverty should also encompass these different situations and needs of individuals without confining them to a rigid definition.
With the current measures in mind, the following sprout represents the different aspects of our definition of poverty. These aspects include capabilities, choice, income, freedoms, the SPM, the MDPI, in both qualitative and quantitative analysis. To help visualize the ever-growing and changing nature of poverty, we created a sprout to emphasize this and encourage other people to help this measure grow.
You might be saying to yourself that this seems difficult, and you'd be right. But poverty is a complex and multifaceted issue that requires attention on all ends.
To make it clearer, we believe that poverty should be measured using a metric of resources and basic needs like the MDPIs. We can measure how many individuals have access to certain resources through gathering data from certain regions. For example, we can gauge a town or region's access to education by reviewing their literacy rates. In addition to this, we still believe it's important to measure income since money buys resources, but we believe that we cannot just resort to measuring income as a measure of poverty. Again, if we reduce an individual to just their income, it often fails to paint a whole picture of the individual's situation.
Because of this, the capabilities approach is an important factor of our measure that prioritizes human dignity. Considering the capabilities of an individual doesn't reduce them down to their situation or the number in their bank account, but it instead provides a deeper understanding and assessment of individual circumstances and societal shortcomings. Capabilities focuses on understanding the reasons behind poverty and addressing it from the root causes.
We also believe that poverty should be measured with choice and freedom in mind. In relation to preserving one's dignity, assistance should not come from a place of pity, but instead a place of which respects the choice and autonomy of each individual and their preferences. No matter the situation or level of poverty, the person is still worthy of equal respect. Nussbaum, a notable contributor to the capabilities approach, highlights the importance of addressing poverty with a focus on preserving the dignity of each individual.
With current measures that rely on measuring one's income, they do not take into account different factors like what are your working conditions? How many hours do you work in a week? Does your job allow you to have bodily integrity? Because
of this disregard for the situation or implicit factors, human dignity is not often preserved. We then believe that poverty should be measured with a focus on respecting the autonomy and dignity of each person.
Robert Rector, a notable contributor to the Heritage Foundation, believes, quote, exaggeration of poverty has the potential to promote a substantial misallocation of limited resources, end quote.
While Rector raises valid points about the misuse of resources, this does not disprove the reality that many individuals lack access to basic necessities in the first place. A holistic definition of poverty must be considered, both access to resources and the conditions of one's ability to effectively use those resources.
Rector or individuals who agree with Rector may argue that an individual's failure to improve their situation reflects a lack of effort rather than a systemic issue.
While personal efforts are crucial, defining poverty should also encompass psychological, social, and economic factors. Individuals may be constrained by systemic challenges or circumstances that are beyond their control, meaning that a complex measure of poverty provides a more holistic understanding.
In conclusion, poverty is extremely complex and circumstantial, and we believe that both its definition and measure should convey and address that. Yu Chen emphasizes that, quote, thresholds change over time, end quote, through focusing on capabilities and the choice and freedom of the individual rather than reducing them down to a number. Our measure provides us with a more comprehensive understanding of poverty and its effects on one's life.
Thank you. If you would like to check out any studies and papers we utilize